There are many ways to approach combat in Morrowind. You can poke things with spear, Bruce Lee things with hand-to-hand, and do ethically questionable things with mysticism. With a total of 27 skills to choose from, it's easy to define your character's strengths, weaknesses, and overall playstyle. But what if you were only allowed to use Restoration, a school of magic dedicated entirely to healing and fortification? How would you deal damage? Would you be able to beat the final boss? Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'll be answering one simple question. Can you beat Morrowind with only restoration spells? So, I started a new game and was violently awoken by a half-naked elf with laryngitis. After he was finished whispering sweet nothings in my ear, I told him my name and then beat the guard in the race to the deck. For my race, I chose a Breton because they're the only race that gets a bonus to restoration. Went inside, selected my skills, and picked the apprentice star sign for the extra magicka. As tradition dictates, whenever you finish character creation, you must steal the Larmware platter. So I did just that, took Dagoth's ring, and picked up the package for Caius. Under Imperial law, I was made a free man, so I entered into Seyda Neen, where the fog is dense, and the air thicker than the lusty Hogonian maid. Now I'm not going to be super strict about the rules of this challenge, but for clarification, the only spells I'm allowed to cast are from the Restoration School. I can't attack anything using melee or marksman skills, and the only potions I can use are store-bought potions or looted potions. So, with those ground rules out of the way, let's begin. Near Seyda Neen, there lies an ancestral tomb with a powerful item. The first thing I do is head to the tomb to the northwest. Avoiding the undead inside, I run to the back where there's an urn containing the Mentor's ring. Slipping my finger into the Mentor's ring gives me a permanent +10 to intelligence and willpower. This will increase my magicka and spell success chance. Now the next thing I need to do is level up my restoration. I don't have the patience to spam heals for the next 2.5 hours, so I'll get some gold and use the trainers instead. Tariel unaliving himself exemplifies just how fun, creative, and downright broken the magic in this game is. One of the easier methods of getting gold early on is to raid one of the vaults in Vivec, so I head towards the Siltstrider. I arrive in Vivec, the city where getting lost is a feature, not a bug, and make my way towards the Redoran Plaza. I level acrobatics so effectively, I give myself repetitive strain injury. And no, using acrobatics and athletics doesn't break the rules. But if you do have a problem with that, then you'll definitely enjoy the next video I'm cooking. Inside the plaza, to the dismay of everyone around me, I take the vault key from these drawers. I stroll over to the Redoran vault. It's not breaking and entering if you have the key, apparently. I have a stare-off with the guard, and win, obviously. With the guard out of the way, I take as much stuff from the vault as I can carry. It was a heist so daring, even the 9 divines were left checking their pockets. Using the Mages Guild, I teleport to Caldera. In Caldera, I go to Gorak Manor, where I can sell my loot to a scamp with lots of gold. I end up with around 32k gold, which should be enough to complete the challenge, I think. Now that gold isn't an issue, I head back to Balmora and use the trainers to level my restoration skill. I was trying to level efficiently so that I could maximise my intelligence gain on level up. At this point you might be wondering, how am I going to do any damage when the only spells I can use are restoration spells? Well, unlike in Skyrim, Morrowind doesn't actually have any restoration spells that do damage, so I'm going to need to find some help. I return to Vivec, proceed to get lost, and then I start a quest to escort a merchant called Tarvin to an imperial town known as Pelagiad. Tarvin's in for a real treat though, and it's not the sunny vacation he expected in Pelagiad. Nope, we're taking a detour straight to Red Mountain, where the scenery is to die for. For the rest of the challenge, Tarvin will be my trusty sidekick, as long as I can keep him alive or restoration, that is. The first thing I do with Tarvin is give him some of the weapons and armour I took from the vault earlier. This will give him a decent boost to his survivability and damage. Unfortunately, he's only got a blunt weapon skill of 36, which might be fine for killing rats and guars, but it's going to be hit or miss when it comes to the creatures of Red Mountain. So, to reduce the amount of time he spends in combat, and therefore the amount of healing I need to do to keep him alive, I'll need to find a way to boost his attributes and skills. Luckily for me, this is exactly what restoration does, but to keep it simple, I'll only be buffing his blunt weapon skill, because I have an even better idea for boosting his agility and strength. I travel to cool, and then I take a boat over to this little Shrek swamp where we head north towards a cave on the coast. Arriving at the cave entrance, I leave Tarvin outside because, let's be honest, the pathfinding in this game is god-awful, and if he gets stuck, the challenge will be over already. In the cave, I encounter an angry naked dark elf. Then I find even more angry naked dark elves. I honestly feel like I've walked in on some weird Dunmer orgy. I find some glass boots, and then I find the loot I'm after, the Fists of Randagulf. God knows what the Fists of Gandalf were doing in a cave full of angry naked dark elves. I'm not sure I want to know. I exit the cave and give Tarvin the Fists. The Fists of Radagast will give Tarvin an extra 20 points to both his agility and strength. This means that both his hit chance and damage will increase. Combine this with the buff that I'll be casting on him and he'll be a much more capable fighter. I return to Balmora to abuse the trainers some more. And this happens as I try to level up. I guess that just confirms that the Fists of Flabbergast do in fact work on NPCs. I head to the Mages Guild to make a restoration spell to heal Tarvin. Then I realise I haven't got a Fortify skill spell, so I'll have to go to Mournhold, then I'll be able to make a blunt weapon buff to improve his hit chance. As I go to rest, Tarvin kills another assassin, which gives me a full set of Dark Brotherhood gear. I'm not planning on getting hit anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. It just looks better than the default potato sack I'm wearing at the moment. But for obvious reasons, I choose not to wear the helmet. I ambush the ambushers so that they don't ambush me anymore by verbally ambushing this guy about my Dark Brotherhood ambusher problem. In Mournhold, I make Tarvin's hit chance buff and some spells to restore Tarvin's attributes if they get damaged. Now that I have buffs, heals and restore attribute spells, and now that Tarvin has good gear and stats, we can head towards Red Mountain. So, using the Silt Strider, we go to Aldroom and make our way towards Ghostgate. To nobody's surprise, we get stopped by cliff racers on the way. Then again by more cliff racers. And then again by even more cliff racers. Trust me, this isn't the last of the cliff racers, this is just your average Morrowind experience. Inside Ghostgate, we snoop around looking for anything useful we can take. I tell this boy in Armiger that tonight my good friend Tarvin will be laying the smackdown on Dagoth Ur and that she's going to have to find a new job. As is the normal reaction to anything in Morrowind, she tries to kill us. Again. And again. And again. But she bugs out when I stand on this table. For some reason, she seems to be hyper-fixated on my character. Maybe it's the outfit, or the hairstyle. I don't know. A win's a win at the end of the day. Eventually she dies, and we take her loot. After that, we leave for Red Mountain. We get ambushed by these cocksuckers again. I told you they'd be back. And to absolutely no one's surprise, the local wildlife of Red Mountain isn't too friendly. I try resting and an ash slave spawns, no big deal. However, I try resting again, and this time a zombie spawns. But, with the combined power of Mercantile and a receding hairline, we defeat them. Our first objective at Red Mountain is to collect the tools Sunder and Keening. They're kept in separate citadels around the mountain and are guarded by some pretty strong enemies. This wouldn't usually be a problem for someone who's 40 hours into the game. But because this is Tarvin we're talking about, I might not have enough magicka to keep him alive. After surviving the onslaught of undead, cliff racers, scamps and ash creatures, we arrive at the first citadel where the tool Sunder is being kept. Upon entering, we deal with more of the usual suspects. Then we encounter this fleshy creature who looks like he's cosplaying as Imhotep from The Mummy. Anyway, these guys can be pretty annoying because they damage your strength and endurance stats. But fortunately, this is a restoration challenge, so that's not much of an issue for me. In previous playthroughs though, I've had my strength damaged so much that I can't actually carry the armour and weapons that I have equipped, so I just end up getting stuck on the spot. Tarvin deals with the Bone Walker, but through the door is an Ascended Sleeper. These are dangerous if you've only got around 40 HP like me. Because we were in such confined space, every time either me or Tarvin got hit by his magic, it would catch us both in the radius, and 9 times out of 10, this would lead to at least one of us dying. So, I found that the best way to deal with him was to get Tarvin to wait in the other room, then I'd use my instant transmission skills to dodge his attacks, until he runs out of magicka. After that, I brought Tarvin through and we were able to beat him in melee. Around the corner we kill one of Dagon's boys. And then down the stairs we kill Phallus Face. Before fighting the boss, we encountered this unique skeleton that gave us some trouble. He kept casting a spell that would absorb over 100 HP on average. There was no way we could beat him face to face. Instead, I had to force him to use up all of the charge on his enchanted shield by baiting his spells. When he ran out of charge, I brought him before the mighty Tarvin, and we beat him the old-fashioned way. Then we fight the mini-boss who's guarding the tool Sunder. He wasn't too difficult, he was certainly easier than the skeleton we just fought. He's level 30 and has around 300 HP, so beating him made me feel confident about our fight with Dagoth Ur. I take Sunder and exit the citadel. It turns out, the easiest path to the next citadel is around the perimeter of the ghost fence, which means a lot more fighting. Tarvin takes multiple lightning blasts to the face and things get a little bit sketchy. However, just like Tsunade, I have two huge assets, those being my healing hands. Tarvin's block skill is only 31, so it's surprising to see just how much he's been blocking. He's now onto his second shield. Hopefully it has enough durability to make it through the rest of the challenge. Entering the citadel, I almost get killed by a golden saint after she knocks me down. I had to pray to the RNG gods that she didn't deliver the killing blow. Luckily, I managed to evade her attack and Tarvin sends her back to Sheogorath. Things get a bit spicy with this flame atronach that almost one-shots me. It turns out, fire hurts when you're on fire. Tarvin then starts tripping balls, and I somehow get Wish.com Dagoth Ur stuck when I open the door. I told you Morrowind had some shitty pathfinding. Tarvin comes to his senses and begins to understand why pinatas are a thing. While Dagoth Doofus is busy entering the pearly gates, I take his key and enter the tower where I retrieve Keening. Now that we have both the tools, we can begin our assault on Dagoth Ur. And in case you were wondering, at this point I'd convinced myself I didn't need the third tool, Wraithguard, and that I could simply use Restoration to heal the damage of the tools. To get to Dagoth Ur, I need to backtrack all the way around the perimeter of the ghost fence again. Which is fine, but it turns out that all of the enemies had respawned. It's what I get for resting in Red Mountain, I guess. Running the gauntlet once more, we face zombies, cliff racers, more fucking cliff racers, and ash slaves. But eventually we arrive at Dagoth Ur's facility, nestled in the heart of Red Mountain. Entering inside, you guessed it, we find more ghouls, tentacle monsters, and ash vampires. It seems I was too hopeful about Tarvin's shield, as it eventually breaks. But fortune favours the bold, because after dealing with the tentacle monster in the tower, we find another glass shield. There's also an almost full set of glass armour here, so I take it just in case Tarvin's gear breaks. After dealing with the rest of the enemies, we prepare to fight the penultimate boss. Now this guy casts a pretty stinky spell that damages your intelligence. I had to reload a few times because that spell really messed up my magicka reserves. This time, however, I let Tarvin tank the spells instead and we beat him easily. We rest before entering the facility cavern and are greeted by the one, the only, Dagoth Ur. It took me this long to notice that he hasn't been doing his usual, "Come Nerevar, friend or traitor, come." I think this is because it's one of the few times where I've come straight here instead of going through the main quest. Now at this point, I just expected him to be aggressive, but something my small noodle didn't comprehend when planning this was that he actually gives you, the player, the courtesy of the first blow. So, I was stuck. Tarvin couldn't attack him, even if I positioned Dagoth Ur between the both of us. And pickpocketing? Well, that just opens the normal dialogue menu, so that's not very useful either. The door to the heart chamber was sealed as well, so without cheats there was no way I was skipping this encounter. I'm sorry Dagoth Ur, it looks like you won't be receiving the first blow anytime soon. So, I had to think of something else, unless I was willing to accept that I just wasted the past 5 hours trying to do this challenge. I thought that if I could bring an NPC all the way back up here, then get them to cast an area spell of command that also hits Dagoth Ur, then that might make him aggressive. The logic behind that being that when you use a command spell, it adds that creature or humanoid to your party, and therefore makes them hostile to the same things. So, if the NPC's hostile to me, and they add Dagoth Ur to their party with the command spell, then he should start attacking me, right? And that's the only thing I could think of that might actually work. Now how would I get an NPC to cast a specific spell? Well, in Morrowind, merchants would generally equip the most expensive item they're carrying that isn't a part of their normal stock. So if I go to an enchanter, create an amulet with a command spell on it, and then trade that amulet to a merchant, they should equip it automatically. Then, when they enter combat, they should cast the spell if its offensive value is greater than their melee attack value. And with a new plan of action, we leave the citadel. I tell Tarvin to wait here by the door because I don't want him killing the merchant while they're chasing me back to Red Mountain. I get past the Ghost Gate. I pick up a few friends on the way. I launch a raid on this Legion fort, accidentally on purpose. My guy is looking rather pleased with himself about the whole ordeal though. In Aldrune, I bought some spells from this mage and stocked up on more potions at the Mages Guild. I get myself expelled from the Mages Guild just so I can move this mage away from my table. I find the nearest guard and pay my fine to calm the mages down. And then I go back inside and steal her soul gems, but due to the sound of my cheeks clapping, I almost get caught. I buy some amulets, and then set off for Tel Branora. I buy a command creature spell from a shiny wizard in a giant mushroom tower. Then I get an enchanter to make 2 amulets. This amulet will hopefully allow me to make Dagoth Ur aggressive. And this amulet will allow me to add any humanoid NPC to my party temporarily, allowing me to move them through doors. I find this merchant and give him the command creature amulet. Then I stick my grubby little fingers in his pockets, just enough to piss him off, and we begin our journey to Red Mountain all over again. This guy's seen some shit. I almost get lost on the way, but luckily I find some signs. And as you can see, it seems to be a quiet day here in Morrowind. When we get to Aldrune, the guards are more than delighted to kill the creatures, but they seem to be quite selective in their interpretation of breaching the peace when it comes to the Ashlanders. I carry on towards Ghost Gate anyway. And when I get there, not only are the Ashlanders still following me, but surprise surprise, the cliff racers have joined in on the fun. Now begins the arduous task of trying to isolate the merchant. If I don't do this, then it'll be difficult to try to target the correct NPC with the enchanted amulet. Here I demonstrate a masterclass in patience as I repeatedly get knocked down and pummeled into oblivion. Although thanks to my restoration magic, I just heal the damage anyway. 20 minutes later, in a miraculous turn of events, as I'm knocked to the ground, I manage to separate them using the gate, and thus we begin the climb. Cliff racers. I was wondering when they'd show up. It's fair to expect 3 or 4, but seriously, this is becoming a fucking joke now. I end up in a very sticky situation on this bridge with a small handful of cliff racers and a couple of ash slaves thrown in for good measure. My ass is torn asunder by their magic, but with the secrets of restoration at my fingertips, I'm the world's best colorectal surgeon. The merchant somehow falls off the bridge, which funnily enough corrects his pathfinding. And like a filthy Khaji Enwa with my tail between my legs, I make it back to Tarvin and I give him the other amulet. I then get Tarvin to follow me, and this will allow him to cast the amulet on the merchant after he hits me. Then we move the merchant inside and the spell wears off. And because the command spell ends, we can exit the citadel and the merchant stays inside while we deal with what's out here. Tarvin gets reminded that he's still in Morrowind. Seriously, look at how many fucking cliff racers there are. Tarvin's an absolute chad though, so he has no problem dealing with it. And in a slow but satisfying process, he takes them down, one by one. Surely this is worse than Blood Moon, right? I mean, yeah, you can't go 10 feet without fighting a Spriggan, or Bear, or Wolf, or Reekling, but there's at least 15 cliff racers here. Just an average day in Vardenfell, I guess. I level up, and we head back into the Citadel. Playing a magical game of hopscotch, I try to avoid all the enemies. This is to prevent Tarvin from wasting the charge on the amulet. Once I'm in the correct position though, then he can use the amulet. And once again, we move the merchant to the next area. Tarvin finishes off the enemies in here so we can rest and recharge the amulet. I repeat this process a few more times until we get to the room with Dagoth Ur. I get Tarvin to wait, and then I head in and position myself next to Dagoth Ur. The merchant uses the amulet. It adds Dagoth Ur to his party, and he starts to attack. I bring Tarvin back in, and he kills the merchant. Now, because Tarvin wasn't in the room when the merchant used the amulet, he won't attack Dagoth Ur until he hits me first, so I need to tank a hit from him. And while I technically use light armor here to mitigate some damage, before you scream at me in the comments, his weakest attack before mitigation is still less than my max health. It would just have taken me longer to get a good roll. If I wanted to avoid this altogether, I would have just made sure that Tarvin was in the room when the merchant cast the command spell. So, enjoy the Dagoth Ur making me his bitch montage. I have to spam my healing here because his damage is so high. I just about have enough time to buff Tarvin's blunt weapon. But sometimes, he would just straight up die from close to full HP because I decide to buff him instead of healing him. It was an intricate balance between trying to keep Tarvin's damage as high as possible whilst keeping him alive. I think if Tarvin didn't have a shield for this fight, then it would have become much harder. The only way I could get ahead of the damage with my healing was when he blocked an attack. I end up using all of my magicka potions, and we just about managed to kill him. I only had enough magicka for one more heal, so those shield blocks came in pretty clutch. Now it's onto the heart chamber. I decide to leave Tarvin in the cave because I want to make sure that the room is safe enough before I bring him in.
What a fool you are. I'm a god. How can you kill a god? What a grand and intoxicating innocence. How could you be so naive?
I tried to dodge these great balls of fire. I jump down and give Dagoth Ur a tightrope performance. It's not much, but it's enough to force him to do his best Tariel impression. Then I break every single bone in my body by jumping down to the bridge. Nothing a bit of restoration can't fix. Dagoth Ur returns from Yardrat with the accuracy of a stormtrooper. And I take a leap of faith and drink a levitation potion. Dagoth Ur tries the same thing, except he left his levitation potions at home this morning. Now that Dagoth Ur has been dealt with, I go back to Tarvin and get him to follow me. We run back down to the heart of Lorkhan, and I was hoping that this is the end of the challenge. I cross the bridge with Tarvin and approach the heart, and it's at this point I realise, how am I going to destroy the heart without breaking the rules? If I attack the heart with keening, that'll be using shortblade, and if I attack it with Sunder, then that will count as blunt weapon. And just like before, Tarvin can't hit the heart when he's trying to attack me, even if I position the heart between us. So, I'm out of ideas again. And I actually contemplate ending the run here, and don't come back to it for a few days. But I can't abandon the challenge, for Tarvin's sake. It's a moral obligation to the companion who stood by my side, literally and figuratively. But then I realised something. Just as I used the command spell to aggro Dagoth Ur, could I use that on the heart? I mean, probably. According to the UESP wiki, it's listed as a special creature just like Dagoth Ur. But what then? How would I damage it? Before, Dagoth Ur became aggressive because he was under the command of a merchant who at the time was hostile towards me. But what if I add the heart to my party while, let's say, 2 merchants wielding Sunder and Keening are hostile towards me? Would that make the merchants hostile towards the heart? I don't know, but it's all I've got for now. So I leave the facility. Again. With a renewed sense of purpose, we retrace our steps to Ghostgate, where I once again run into the 2 Ashlanders. This time though, I have Tarvin with me, and he isn't too happy about missing round 2 with Daddy Dagoth. While at Ghostgate, Tarvin does what he does best, which is, when he's not killing assassins or cliff racers, pissing off the buoyant armigers. We end up with some nice glass armour upgrades, and looking the part, we head for Aldrune. In Aldrune, I go to the enchanter and make the final amulet. This should allow the heart to be added to my party. I take a moment and restore my attributes at the local temple. And then I head to Balmora, where I visit the first of the 2 merchants. I steal from him to start combat, and Tarvin uses the amulet. I run to the guard and turn myself in. Now the merchant will drop combat. and I repeat this process with the other merchant. Now that they're both outside, I give one Sunder and the other I give Keening. I aggro one of the merchants and then run to the Silt Strider where I have Tarvin waiting. When the merchant hits me, Tarvin uses the amulet and I'm able to briefly use the Silt Strider to transport them to Aldrune. I once again pay the fine in Aldrune to drop combat. And I do the same thing with the remaining merchant until they're both in Aldrune. Then I pickpocket them again for the final time and we head for the mountain. I have to avoid getting attacked by the merchants until we get to the citadel, otherwise Tarvin will try to kill them. I get a nice reminder of Tarvin's capabilities as I see a trail of Cliff Racer corpses. I'll be honest, this was by far the most frustrating thing I've had to do in Morrowind. I was constantly jumping around, avoiding the merchant's attacks, and at the same time trying to heal Tarvin as he deals with the enemies. In hindsight, I probably should have got my restoration skill higher before starting. I definitely felt that the Mentor's Ring was making a big difference here though. You can see that even with 0 fatigue, my spell chance is not 100%. But eventually, with a lot of reloading, I was able to brute force my way up the mountain with the merchants. Crossing the bridge, I got a strong feeling of deja vu. Miraculously, there seems to be only one Cliff Racer chasing us this time. Finally, we arrive at the top of the mountain, and we begin moving the merchants using the amulet. And unfortunately, I discover in the time that I've been gone, some of the sleepers have respawned in the heart chamber. So using a levitation potion, I put them under the same genjutsu as Dagoth Ur. Now that they've been dealt with, I go back out and get Tarvin and the merchants. We gaze upon Lorkhan one last time as we run down to the heart of Lorkhan. Cross the bridge, and I quickly trade the new amulet to Tarvin. After a bit of awkward positioning, he casts the spell, the heart gets added to my party, and much to my surprise, the merchants start to attack it with the tools.
Ha! Die! What are you doing? What are you doing? Fool! Stop! This is the end. The bitter, bitter end.
The heart gets destroyed, and Tarvin, in a display of dominance, asserts that he is the #1 companion by killing the two merchants. And now, as I go to collect my reward from Azura, Tarvin falls to a fiery death, offering the ultimate price to complete our challenge. I watched on as Lorkhan crumbled, and even though I was glad that the challenge had been completed, I realised something. I'll have to live with the regret that I could never take Tarvin back to Pelagiad. He completed my quest, but I couldn't complete his. So I left the heart chamber, claimed my reward from Azura, and got the ending cinematic. And that is how you complete Morrowind using only restoration spells. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Mehrunes Mike. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next challenge.